All right. Good evening. Welcome back to Pump Up the Volume. Thank you for everyone who's joining us again. And for anyone joining us for the first time, my name is Muñoz. I'm a medical doctor, also technologist, and previous independent gubernatorial candidate in Rhode Island, joined by my fellow co hosts who are far more famous than I am. So we have, again, Mr. Bill Bartholomew from the Bartholomew Town podcast, who actually has season 4 out. And so please check those out. Some interesting interviews with the politicals in Rhode Island, as well as a PBS show, and of course making moves and expanding into other mediums like WPRO. So keep up with Bill. As if you don't know Bill, what we can say is that Bill is always on the front lines, bringing us the news in real time, and frankly, other news stations are getting their news from him. So it's great to have him on the show. We have Mr. Scott Rotundo from WBOB 990, so independent media outlet, and Scott's always interviewing some of the political leaders throughout the state, as well as at the grassroots level. And so, really digging into what the nuances of issues are across cities and towns, which is important, right? Because many times those stories are lost. And what we're trying to do here and Pump Up the Volume is to amplify, right, what those issues are so that we can find some common ground or in that kind of common or shared struggle. We also have Mr. Pat Ford from the Coalition Radio Network, which we're actually streaming through. Thank you, Pat, for creating this opportunity for us to be here. And also, Pat is the co-founder of the Libertarian Party here in the state of Rhode Island. So if you notice that he goes 100% anti-government on this show, just realize those are the opinions and comments of Mr. Pat Ford and not the opinion. So no, but all jokes aside, it's great to have all of us here together. And to start the day, we're going to have here's the agenda for the show. Scott's going to give us a rundown on what's going on the national kind of political news front. And then we're going to follow up with local news here in the state of Rhode Island, and Bill will give us a rundown of the last 7 days and what the next 7 will look like. And then we're going to kind of dig into some of those issues that we're confronting here in the state of Rhode Island. So with that, Scott, would you like to lead the way?
Sure, sounds good to me. Just keeping an eye on things down in Washington D.C. with our brand spanking new president. I get a few observations. I'll just kind of hit them really quickly here. One thing I'm not so crazy about is the number of executive orders that President Biden has been putting out. He says he's doing it to, eliminate bad policy, and I get that. I always get a little punchy when elected leaders start ruling by fiat, just ruling by like the stroke of the pen instead of going through the actual machinations of Congress. We always have to keep in mind whether we like or dislike the president that's in office currently. The next one can always do the same thing. So, the same people that are cheering right now for these executive orders will scream just as loudly if a GOP person gets in as the president and does his or her own executive orders. It's just something I like to, keep track of. And I've noticed it happening more and more with presidents. And I do takes more power from the legislator and brings it into the executive branch, which, as we know, is not really how the country was set up originally. Some good news. It looks like Biden is looking to stick with the $1,400 stimulus checks to go to people to kind of make up that $2,000 that have been talked about before. Something that I saw that, again, I also liked, but I liked it, but I'm disheartened by the reaction to it. The fact that last night President Biden talked to 10 Republican senators about his plans, and they kind of gave their ideas. Of course, they wanted a slimmed down bill. And what I've seen really the reaction from my friends on like the far left and the far right is like the far left is upset that Biden was talking to the Republicans about this. Why not just ram it through? And my far right friends are upset that Republican senators are caucusing with the president on this. It's just really disappointing to me because isn't that what they're supposed to do? They're supposed to set partisan differences aside and try to do what's best for the American people. It's just kind of my observation there. It seems like, at least in this case, Biden is trying to do that. To wrap up, stimulus and all of that aside, still very concerned with the vaccine rollout. It seems like in record time we had vaccines out to combat this pandemic, and now you're hearing, well, there's a few hundred doses here, a few hundred doses there, and I just struggle with finding out like what needs to be done to get this rolled out a lot faster. Because I think we can all agree the faster it can get rolled out, the faster we can get people inoculated and build some sort of immunity to this, the faster we can get to some kind of normal, even if it's not all the way back to normal in say 2019, at least to get out of the rabbit wheel that we're on right now.
Yeah, thanks so much for the rundown, Scott. I mean, it's before we hand it off to Bill. It's interesting because on one hand, you see these bottlenecks at the federal level, which largely could be a result of things that we're not aware of, right? Like negotiating price points for some of the vaccines with the various companies. On the other hand, you just have the challenge of the trucking challenge, right? Let's call it what it is: the logistics around getting these things transported from one location to the next. And then the third element and layer of this, I think, is one where we're seeing states displace accountability. We saw that earlier in this pandemic, but a state like Pennsylvania and the recent PBS story regarding that early stage startup that was given the responsibility to distribute vaccination also shows that states also have a role in how those vaccines are distributed and have to be held accountable when their decisions ultimately are bad ones. So with that, as a transition into the state of Rhode Island and the news updates over the past week, I'd love to get a rundown, Bill, as to where are we today with everything, right? Politicians, campaigns, governors, and vaccines.
Well, as far as vaccines go, there's not much progress. We're seeing municipal leaders, I guess, sort of step up and compete for the notion that their municipality has their act together more than another. There's going to be an interesting meeting tomorrow. Dan McKee is going to lead it with municipal leaders from around the state. They're going to try to develop a plan to have realistic numbers, realistic expectations as far as how much is coming from the manufacturer so that they're not over promising, because I think that's a big factor in where the resentment is coming right now in terms of the vaccine rollout here, is that overpromise. We remember the original graphics that the health department rolled out back in December, and it was like, I remember seeing those and thinking, all right, they're saying I'm going to get vaccinated based on my criteria in April. I'm going to go ahead and plan on like July, like for my birthday in August. Let's hope that I'm vaccinated. I think that's probably pretty accurate now. So unrealistic expectations, last mile delivery totally absent, no ability to really flex where vials go once they've been removed from a cooler or other delivery system. So you're not getting the small numbers of, let's say, 10 extra vaccine in a box to 10 people who are 75 and over that should qualify, or frontline retail workers. And I think we're also seeing this vacuum, this awful vacuum of communication from the State House. Raimondo yesterday with this, like as Matt Allen said, the weird video of her standing in front of her house talking about the snowstorm. While 42 days without speaking to the press. And yeah, she's going to get confirmed tomorrow. Yeah, she's going to give the state of the state and disappear. But in the meantime, there's a lot of confusion, and a lot of people are upset about this vaccine situation in such a way that it's continuing to spiral. A week ago, Rep. Williams put out a press release basically echoing concerns that I raised at the previous press conference that were ridiculed by a far-right talk radio host here, and is that people are at least optically concerned about CEOs and boards of directors taking the vaccine. Even if there's no merit to the idea that they shouldn't have it, those optics are terrible. And that's really, again, I think that goes back to the heart of the matter. They overpromised, underdelivered. They've shown their inability to be flexible and free thinking on the fly. And they have what appears to be, at minimum, if not cronyism, an ugly optical challenge. So vaccine number one, real quick, opening bell for the political season heading into 2022 as the campaign finance reports come out. Magaziner in and Alorza looking pretty good, particularly Alorza in terms of the gubernatorial race. And how about Brett Smiley, who stands up there on the stage on a regular basis advertising himself, while a state director with an enormous campaign account, look out.
Do we have to talk about Brett Smiley?
There should be a horn that goes off on that, you know.
Thanks for the update. Yeah, so a lot to unpack there. I guess why don't we start with I think the question of whether money should determine the next governor. I think that's a deeper question, but kind of simple in its surface, given that we have concerns around the vaccination and distribution. Let's talk about McKee. So McKee is now going to officially transition into governor. My guess is the biggest political play that McKee will make over the next 10 days is determining who the lieutenant governor is and hoping that that carries some weight into the gubernatorial race. But I believe that that also has implications for McKee's handling of this crisis. And here's why I'm saying that. I mean, you normally want to select someone that's complementary to you, right? Where are the knowledge gaps? How do you bring a person that can address those knowledge gaps closer to you? It doesn't really seem like anyone on that list or interest, or the person that we likely know will be in that position, is bringing any kind of covering any knowledge gaps that McKee has currently, especially with respect to this crisis, or even in terms of like the larger economic crisis, right, that's resulting from the pandemic. So what does McKee do in the next 100 days, given that as of now, it really seems like it's just going to be McKee, a lieutenant governor that has limited insights into these issues, is not really going to be able to contribute much. So what does that look like, guys?
Well, first of all, can we close out the Gina Raimondo era with just a snippet of a poem? I think it's out not with a bang but a whimper. Her approach, her ability to complete, her ability to organize, everything that is a testament to the regime, otherwise known as the Raimondinistas, has been summed up in the last 60 days of her administration. Failure to plan, failure to bring people together, failure to mobilize. It's just really, people seem stunned that it would end this way. I would have been stunned if it hadn't, because the stench of failure, utter, total, incomplete, surrounds the Raimondo administration. Hers is a administration that filled with, if you look at the salaries and the education of the people involved, should have been filled with promise. Instead, and if you look at her experience in industry, it should have been filled with promise. But then we found out her experience in industry was thoroughly mediocre. We found out her execution of literally everything she's done in the last 6 years has been thoroughly mediocre or borderline incompetent or borderline criminal. So, I'm stunned that these people are stunned. But then again, Doctor, as you pointed out, and I'll perhaps be a little bit more poetic about it, the media in this town, the mainstream media, the conventional media, or as we all know, who we're talking about, right, Doctor? The varsity media in this town, right? The varsity media in this town is, I'll use a sports analogy because it's Super Bowl week, are truly the New York Jets. And so as a result, we look upon this and we see nothing but 6 years of opportunity lost. And if there's a coda to this, it would in fact be that. Now, what has the McKee administration done wrong in its first non-week? I called him governor in waiting. That term seems to be going around. As governor in waiting, the first thing he did was cede to the Raimondinistas the high ground. Why, with 2 years left, why is he not hiring his own administration to execute, his own vision? Is it because he has none? How is that possible when you've been preparing for 6 years? 6 years. The whole gig about the lieutenant governors, you're supposed to be, you are the Dick Cheney of Rhode Island politics. You're waiting in that secure location for when the inevitable happens, either indictment or, in this case, a full proof of the Peter Principle. So the first thing you do is hire or retain the vestiges of a failed administration with whom you've been not so secretly, openly at war with for 6 years. So that by definition will be the next 100 days. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss, more the same. How can it be anything but if in fact the same soldiers are executing it? So that to me was the single biggest disappointment in all this. And I look to all of your perspectives just on that point.
Well, one of the things I want to get, Scott and Bill's perspective as well. But just to interject here, like oftentimes we hear that one of the things that McKee does well, and this is coming from at the community level, is he creates these listening sessions, right? And he listens and people like that he's listening. We're still in a rapid response environment, like execution and just the ability to be decisive and to understand the risk when you're making decisions is key. And while I consistently have disagreed with the outgoing administration's approach because I felt that it lacked a lens of equity, what I can say, and I think what we can all say, is when that administration made a decision, they made a decision. And oftentimes they made a lot of decisions very quickly, which just kind of compounded the inequities that we're seeing in Rhode Island. So if McKee's coming in, and if the assumption is he's listening a lot, and therefore somehow that implies he has a lens of equity, my question with where he's at today, and not necessarily making much in the way of movements internally, and not bringing someone on that's complementing that lack of experience that he has, is that he's not going to be as decisive. Now, what are your thoughts, Scott and Bill? I mean, what's your take on that? Like, is McKee the guy that's going to be able to adjust when needed in this crisis?
Bill, I think it remains. Bill, you want to lead off?
No, it's all you, Scott. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it remains to be seen. I mean, with a lot of things in life, you don't know how people are going to react to situations until it's upon them. And I don't know if he's kind of playing it like he is right now, just until he sits in the big person seat or not. It all remains to be seen. I certainly hope that he can act decisively and in the people's best interests. To follow up on something that Pat said, though, I can't say that I'm surprised at the end of the Raimondo administration. I do differ with him on this, though. I don't feel that if they want to call themselves the varsity media, I don't feel that they were the New York Jets. I wouldn't call them that at all. I would call them actual cheerleaders. Okay, essentially an unpaid, the national PR team that the governor had, and it's okay. But be PR, and then be surprised now that there's like potatoes. Yeah, some would say that was the best part of the program. Way, but no, I mean to be surprised that the PR arm was surprised when it dropped like a hot potato. Now that she's on the national stage, I mean, I watched some of these TV personalities looking almost like jilted lovers. I mean, what did they expect? It was never a secret. At least I think McKee may legitimately want to, that this is the goal for him, to lead the state, to help people and to leave a positive mark. I feel like with our outgoing governor, and again, it doesn't mean she's a bad person, but this was always a step on the ladder for her. And now that step's achieved, the people that helped her get there can kind of, it's away is kind of how she's looking at it.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Bill?
Well, with McKee, the only thing right now we can do is wait to see how he executes decisions when the spotlight and the pressure is on him. You know what I mean? Does he bungle something, botch something as obvious as the restaurant time curfew, whatever you want to call it, change, and delaying that for several days to quote unquote implement ideas? Or does a McKee come out, tap into that sort of killer instinct he probably has as a basketball coach, and even as a municipal leader, making quick and in those moments potentially inconsequential, but now really important decisions. I think what's going to be critical to watch from McKee is, does he have the ability to balance the workers' of the facilities that he's dealing with, as well as the owners of the facilities that he's dealing with. So take, for example, Twin River, which Pat has spent plenty of time discussing, we'll say, at the press conferences. Whose side is he on? Is he able to find a way to balance the workers, the employers, if you will, Bally's, whatever the hell it's called, that operate Twin River, the restaurants? How can he find a way to ensure worker safety, but also ensure that the small business itself isn't literally hemorrhaging cash and going out of business? Does he find a way to bridge those two areas? Because Governor Raimondo could not do that. She couldn't thread that needle. So that's what I'm looking for in his quick decisions, that is a give and take on both sides of this issue, but also obviously leaning towards safety more than anything else. And I think that has the chance to be the McKee doctrine, the ability to thread the needle. And he leans to the right of probably where many people in the state would like to see decisions being made, but at the same time, I believe he'll be able to appeal to a wider coalition than Gina Raimondo did. I just put up look, I'm not freaking Pew or anything like that. This isn't, the polling I do is hardly scientific, but I put up a question on Facebook and Instagram. What grade would you give Governor Raimondo? And of the responses I've gotten, there's some B pluses, there's some C minuses, but if you're progressive, and if I know you and you're progressive, or if I check out your Instagram account and I look at you and I go, okay, this person likes Bernie Sanders and Aaron Reaganberg, or if you're someone I know to be conservative, those two sectors either gave an F or a D minus or made a disparaging remark about Raimondo. So that coalition, can McKee find a way to, in both directions, win over portions of the progressive and the conservative base, and find a way to marry them on the idea of safety and not completely annihilating the economy? That's what he's got to do. It's going to be tough. I don't know if he can.
Well, Bill, if I can kick in with a sports analogy real quick, and I think maybe Scott can get this cultural reference. If anyone's heard of the Four Corners offense, I fear we're about to go into the Four Corners offense, and I'll let people Google that. It's not a good thing. Bold, decisive action needs to take place now. He needs to seize the reign of role, if you will, of government. He never should have played this waiting game. You audition for the job you want. You act as if you've got the job. There was no need for him to defer to her. In fact, if anything, and Bill, you're absolutely spot on. In my entire lifetime, outside of Donald Trump on a local level, Gina Raimondo is the most polarizing politician I have ever seen. And she has managed to accomplish the heretofore thought impossible, in that if folks like me loathe her governorship, folks on the progressive side loathe her governorship for a lot of, ironically, the same reasons. If there wasn't a Donald Trump, you probably would look at Gina Raimondo and say, wow, how does she manage to get everybody to hate her? And I tell you, we're all active on social media. Anyone, it's kind of like the demise of the Trump jokes now. Because for a lot of people in Rhode Island media, it was awfully easy to say, "Hey, what do you think of Gina Raimondo?" and kick back on the at WP. At a radio station or a news outlet near you, and kick back and just let the phone calls come in. Bill, you've probably seen that firsthand yourself.
Yeah, and I don't know that that'll be the case with Dan McKee. He's not. He doesn't have the rock star qualities that Gina Raimondo was at least purported to have, and ultimately did, in terms of her national media credentials, credentials as in appearances. But Dan McKee will be a much more boring administration. There's no doubt about it. And perhaps that'll help the cause. It'll just be more of a, hey, let's let the health experts take over. Let's let small business leaders tell us what we need to do to bridge this period, and not have any ulterior motives. Because that from day one, the Raimondo team was sending tapes, probably produced by Channel 12, right? The feed, and sending that to Joe Biden's camp. And they were cutting. I know that there was some person in a basement somewhere cutting together a reel of Gina Raimondo's performances at these press conferences, with background music and with the music big builds, and there's the drone shot of the Newport Bridge or something like that. You know what I mean? You know that piece of content exists. I don't think Dan McKee's worried about that. I think he's worried about keeping the state moving forward and keeping the numbers as low as possible within reason, you know?
So I just want to add here that, and the entire conversation we're having now, it's interesting that every time Dan McKee's name comes up, somehow the recent history of, again, bringing social justice to the forefront, right? Systemic racism to the forefront. It never is introduced in the same sentence as Dan McKee, and I think there's a reason for that. I think that McKee is always trying to take the safe path when it comes to addressing some of the most contentious issues like systemic racism. And if anything comes up between now and 2022, which things are coming up on a daily basis, he is going to be forced to have to say something. And I'm interested in what Bill, you've been covering Dan McKee. Have you seen him take positions on issues like that? Strong positions.
I can remember there was one incident. I mean, right after the George Floyd episode. In fact, the day actually of the Providence Mall, I don't know what you want to call it, riot, chaos, setting the cop car on fire, that whole thing. Black Lives Matter Rhode Island, which, is an organization that we could do a whole, there's critiques to be made of that particular organization, right? Not necessarily representing an entire community, but that was the lowest hanging fruit in terms of a quick place for Dan McKee to go. When Governor Raimondo and no other leaders were really acknowledging Black Lives Matter in early June, Dan McKee walked Providence with them, with Brother Gary and that group of people. And I remember Dan McKee calling into Matt Allen, and Matt Allen was kind of ripping Black Lives Matter, and Dan McKee screaming into the phone, asking Matt Allen, "Do Black Lives Matter? Can you answer that question?" And Matt Allen's going, "Oh, of course they do. I mean, what kind of question is that?" McKee's like, No. Tell me, what does that mean to you? So is it performative? I mean, sure, it's politics, but at the same time, I think that there's a realistic element to that as well, where I think Dan McKee is more in touch with the on the ground. And I remember in 2018 where McKee was in a leather jacket and like some kind of jogging pants and a URI basketball baseball hat, walking around South Providence right here in Elmwood. Really, you, Dr. Muñoz, and Dan McKee were the only two people who were in these neighborhoods on a regular basis that I literally saw with my eyes on a regular basis. But I remember Dan McKee going door to door and having conversations with people as if he knew them. Maybe it came from his basketball experience. Maybe it came from something else. But he at least knows, he literally knows, like Camp Street and Elmwood Avenue and Broad Street. He at least knows the terrain. I don't think Gina Raimondo's ever walked around where I'm living right now in South Providence. Mm-hmm. So I think there is a difference there. Now, again, McKee's more conservative than, the community here by and large would probably like to see if they had a true ambassador, but it's a bridge.
And does he get a free pass, right? Are people going to say, what would you say? I guess, we have media, independent media leaders right here. Does he get a free pass? Can he say, if he cannot do anything in the next 12 months outside of letting the machine run, but not necessarily address things to make them more efficient, does he get a free pass for 2022?
No.
What Gina's fault?
No way. No way. No. Let me. If I could tell you my favorite Dan McKee moment, if you will, and I think it's telling, and I only just happened to be there on the day of the big march, when waves and waves and waves of Rhode Islanders marched up, if you will, past them all up to the Capitol. Dan McKee was standing there watching it on the sideline, and I recognized him. He was in a suit. You could tell he just come from the office, and he was watching it. And it wasn't just he was standing there to be seen. He was watching it intently. So I went up to him. I think I actually have this on tape. And I said, Lieutenant Governor, why don't you join us? Come on. We'll go for a walk. And you could tell he was torn. I've been in sales for 30 years. My job is to understand body language. You could tell he was torn. Because on one hand, he even mentioned, what about social distancing and everything? I said, we're all fine. Just come along for a walk. And he desperately wanted to. And I hope, because I think he's got huge potential. My disappointment is only the tenuous nature of his, if you will, of the birthing process as he becomes governor. He's got the skills, if you will, to come together with people, to join. Again, I called him the last show, I called him a mensch, and that's a compliment. A mensch is every man, but at the same time, he's not every man. So if someone at his level, with his education, can blend and coalesce with all sorts of Rhode Islanders, he can kill it. He can do a hell of a job. If he sits back on the sideline and, as you put it, Doctor, allows the machine just to run on autopilot, while at the same time the very people who brought it to this spot are allowed to remain in significant governmental roles, he's going to get crushed, absolutely crushed. And that would be a shame, because he is a talented individual, and I think he's an honest individual, and I think he's a very empathetic individual. He just needs to blow it up right now. Kick some ass, take some names, and engage quickly. Be on a warlike, emergency-like footing, as opposed to this, we're going to get to talk and we're going to think about it and we're going to talk about it. No time left. And that's not his fault.
So let's go with that. Let's go with that. So Pat says he needs to be bold. Can everyone think of one bold thing that McKee needs to do in the first 100 days? Why don't we go? We'll do in this order. We'll go Scott, then Bill, then Pat.
All right. In terms of COVID vaccine rollout, he has to be bold. He has to let the people of Rhode Island know that he's going to secure as many doses of this as possible, and that he's going to do, even if it's just lip service, even if he's just training, just say he's going to do everything he can to make sure there's no more, CEOs and board members jumping the line to get the vaccine. Because not only, as bad as those optics were, if that can be his moment to get up there and say, even if there's not much he can do about it, just to say that he's going to do something about it could galvanize people. I mean, it would be something bold. It's not that, again, we're going to talk about it. We're going to see what happened. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be, now that we have an alumni, if you will, in the Biden administration, I'm going to see if I can get in touch with the administration and get more doses in here.
In his first, I would say less than 100 days, I would say in his first 30 days, create a regional, a package of regional vaccination centers that are not municipally oriented, but are controlled by the Department of Health, that includes a modern day, extremely well organized and thought out call list that includes transportation elements. I don't care if it's MTM, RIPTA, Uber, whatever, that finds a way to get people through a screening process that's very quick and effective, but also accurate. So in other words, you've got a regional, let's say you've got 4 regional sites, and one on Block Island. So let's call it 5. South County, Providence, East Bay, West Bay, Northern Rhode Island, whatever it is. And you get people who are, that have the ability to create a list of those who need vaccines from an age perspective, an occupational perspective, or any other criteria. And as vaccine become available, that person's job is to get the next person on the list into that regional clinic to be vaccinated, or deliver that vaccine to that person using the regional clinic as a hub. That type of strategy has to be at least considered, and I think it would be the first most important thing he could do in his first month or so.
Good stuff. Excuse me for my cold. All right, my turn. Next Monday, declare his own State of the State address. This spend the next couple of days going to the state media and saying, I would like to request airtime given the emergency nature of the current state of events in Rhode Island. 8 o'clock at night, make it Dan McKee's, if you will, steal the spotlight from Gina Raimondo. The notion that she is giving the State of the State address tomorrow, that they have allowed her this sort of exit stage right policy is to me ludicrous. All right. So Dan McKee comes out with his own State of the State address. What does he do? I believe he announces a policy similar to what Bill just described in terms of regional immunization centers. Get it back out of the state. You don't even have to apologize for it. Don't even go there. Just say, hey, you know what? In respect, after having conversations with the mayors, what we've done is decided to do this. Fill in the blanks. Number two, I am demanding from the Biden administration and Governor Raimondo and associated boards an accounting for, in a clear erudition of where medical stocks are going to be, where the supplies are going to be within 30 days. We need to understand that as a state going forward, that in fact the government is going to be responsible for this. Best practices require that. So I demand to know that. And Rhode Islanders need to hear him demanding that on his behalf and sending a clear shot to Washington. The final step, issue a list of requests he's going to make to the General Assembly, because he has to go to the GA, including multiple sales tax holidays, if you will, a honeymoon period on licensing and a variety of excise taxes that businesses have to pay, despite the fact that they're not allowed to legally operate or haven't been, and issue that as a statement. And follow that up by saying, we're going to be aggressively pursuing, and I'm asking, and here's the point, you're doing this in public, in front of the public. And I'm going to ask our congressional delegation to work aggressively to posture and to position any type of aid that comes from the federal government towards our business community. Now, if he does that, let's break with the past, set his own tone, and put people on notice that there's an accountability that has to happen. It's this notion that we can just kind of stumble through after the carnage of the last 8 or 9 months. You know what? We don't know when we're going to get vaccine. Bull bleep. Pfizer knows. Pepperidge Farm knows. Either they don't want to tell it or they're just not being told. So the notion that these major manufacturers don't know what's going to be in the production plans for the next 90 days is balderdash. And a governor of a state in the United States of America in the year 2021, in the midst of this pandemic, should simply refuse to allow that kind of nonsense to be tossed out there. That's my suggestion. That's what I would do.
Thanks, guys. So obviously there are layers to each of these issues, right? And each of you have explained something that is bold and has a downstream effect. And so what I would say, and look, I think you all know, I mean, given that I've ran for governor in the past, you know, half the time you're trying to get out there and say, you should be doing this, you know, and if I were there, I'd do it. But the reality is, you know, if he's willing to do anything today and take advice and be receptive, you know, he should declare racism and poverty as a public health crisis, given what we've seen with COVID-19. And if that declaration is made by the governor of Rhode Island, that sets the tone for the legislature. But if he uses that platform in ways to appease a broader base to win 2022 and airs, you know, kind of strays away from the need today to declare, again, racism and poverty as a public health crisis, then unfortunately, that he would not be the governor that we need in the next 6 to 8 years, given that we're going to face significantly higher rates of poverty, and we've already seen the consequences of systemic racism. So with that, that's my recommendation in terms of boldness that we need in the state of Rhode Island today. And with that, I just want to give everyone a solid 60 seconds to tell everyone what you're going to do over the next week so they can, and where they can find you and what you're doing. And then we'll go ahead and close the show up. So why don't we go This time around, just change it up a bit. We'll go Pat, then Bill, and then Scott.
Great. I'm not going to limit it to this week. I'm going to tell you what we're doing tonight. First off, Lindsay Coso. You may not know that name, but Lindsay Coso, in conjunction with the American Civil Liberties Union here in the state of Rhode Island, Stephen Brown, who's the head honcho, is suing. This is great. Is suing the state of Rhode Island, if you will, and the Attorney General. It has to do with something called APRA, and that's the Access to Public Records Act. Now, if you're an activist, if you're a politician, if you're a journalist, APRA is your tool, one of your lead weapons. And, you know, when this current Attorney General was elected, we were under the impression that he was going to be sort of a white knight. And that's part of the conversation tonight. But we're going to get an understanding of APRA, why the Attorney General is using some loosely written regulations to weaponize against activists like law student Coso, and why they're charging outlandish fees in order to get basic information that's supposed to be communicated to other branches of government anyway. Very special night tomorrow night. All right. RAMP, Real Access Motivates Progress, is a show that award-winning. Actually, ironically, it's been given a significant award by Governor Raimondo. Tina Peterson has been doing this for months now. It's an outstanding opportunity for folks who have members of their family who might have be facing physical challenges, or people themselves who are facing these sort of life-altering physical challenges, whether it be paralysis, autism, all these different diseases. And the focus of the show is on access, and has had an astonishing array of people join her virtually in studio, including our Secretary of State, the chairman of the United Way here in Rhode Island, Congressman Langevin. Joining her tomorrow night is Dr. Chan from your Rhode Island Health Department, if you will, to talk about issues of access, but also obviously issues surrounding COVID and folks who are facing disabilities. You talk about destination viewing. Every Rhode Islander needs to take a moment and spend time with Tina Peterson. She's on every week, every Wednesday at 7 o'clock Eastern time, live here at facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. So stay tuned tonight. Stay tuned tomorrow. We're up to 4 nights. Hey, Billy, the JV is playing 4 nights a week, a 4-night-a-week schedule here in Providence. What do you think about that, huh? Not bad, huh, for the JV?
As a referee, I always enjoyed refereeing the JV games better. You know what I mean? You just have more at stake at that point. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You're fighting for that spot. So, you're not getting lazy.
Absolutely.
Real quick. So season 4 B-Town is up and running. Last week we had Dan McGowan and I guess I was going to say maybe Lieutenant Governor. I don't know the correct term. James Diosa. The applications, by the way, were due at 5 o'clock today. If you're out of work, you're looking for a new job, career change, you could have applied to become Rhode Island's Lieutenant Governor. That's obviously just a farce. People are saying, why don't I apply and just see the process? And I was like, you know what? I just feel badly because there's going to be somebody from McKee's Lieutenant Governor staff who are mostly nice kids. They're going to have to sift through that. I was like, that's one less thing they have to sift through, that nonsense. But today we had Speaker Shikarchi on the show. Great episode coming up on Friday on an issue that I'm super passionate about and been concerned about my whole life. I've engaged in civil disobedience over in Narragansett on many occasions, including in humiliating my mom at one point. Coastal access here in Rhode Island, and a lot of shenanigans going on. And we get into that with one of the leading activists in that community. I'll also say tomorrow night, Wednesday, 7 p.m., if you watch television, Rhode Island PBS, and of course, anytime on demand, we post the shows. I'll share the link on my Twitter at Bill Bartholomew. Tomorrow night, an episode I've been working on since July that looks at Rhode Island's historical ties to slavery. And we go deep. I mean, we are looking at plantations in Narragansett and South County. We're talking, we take on the Brown University formation and legacy. There's a lot in there. Mike Stanton of the Providence Journal joins me, and we break this thing down. And so I'm very proud of it. And it'll be on demand. I know that's where most people see it. So look out. The JV playing hard here.
You're the captain of the JV team, Bill. Okay, how about that?
Yeah, look out. Yeah.
Captain Bill, I like it. It's just like Captain America, only better.
Yeah.
So
That's
you
all. That's
guys
Steve
can catch me
Alquist,
every
Captain America. Better not steal that.
Oh, gotcha. Point taken. Every Monday night, you can catch me on 990wbob.com, and all the past casts are up on that website for you. This week here, I'll be doing a little bit. Actually, I'm going to break a little bit because usually I do my local and national political news and guests on the show. Being a big football fan, I'm going to do kind of an NFL season wrap up. Is going to be kind of my highlight there, just talking about the big game that was, some of the free agency moves coming up, and you'll still have me shooting from the lip. What I promise you guys is every show is I have something to upset the right, if you will, and the left. So there's always a little something for everybody. Again, Mondays from 8 to 9, 990wbob.com.
It's a great show. I can attest to it. And it's nice to have, in a time where talk radio has basically now ends at even if you go for that extra hour of sports talk, it ends at 7:00 locally. So to have the past cast, to have the coalition radio, the past cast on WBOB, the coalition radio, everything that's starting to float around now for the talk radio junkie, you can now, keep that going into the night. So I think that's a really important thing. And the Rotundo's a hell of a show.
Thanks, man. I appreciate
Absolutely.
the props.
Oh, for real. It's great stuff.
So thanks, gentlemen, so much again. I mean, it's just as friends and as just really balanced intellectuals. It's always great to get see through your lens for a moment in time. And so thank you for everyone who's seen the show. Thank you, Cameron, who's been commenting and engaging us, and for everyone else who's been checking the show out. I do want to also lift up that it is Black History Month. I think it is an important time of the year to understand the history of racialized communities and Rhode Island's history in racializing communities, as well as in enslaving people, and even today in the disenfranchisement of communities of color and the role that government plays in perpetuating those systems. It's not to be a downer. It's just for us to take this time to acknowledge, right? To acknowledge that we still have work to do, and we can do that work together. So with that, I do want to, it's a quote, frankly, it's my favorite quote from Dr. King, but one of the statements that he once made was that, he said, "I just want to leave a committed life behind." And I think that all of us in the work that we do at the grassroots level is ultimately based on that fundamental principle, that it's not about us, but it's about, what imprint we might leave behind, and whether on that imprint we might have set a foundation for something new. So thank you, team. I hope you all have a great evening, and look forward to seeing everyone next week here on Pump Up the Volume. Take care.
See you then.